Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine War news update for the 9th of May 2023. Haven't even had a cup of tea yet, and that's dedication. Right, let's get to where we usually start, which is the Ukrainian General Staff released figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. I find these indicatively useful and more accurate than some critics give them credit for being. First category, liquidated personnel, 650 people, Russian troops being liquidated. That is higher than it was yesterday and back up to what it was on previous days, but still much lower than at the height of offensives from either side previously. We have seen 1,100 as the height of the Russian losses on a daily basis. So 650 is, I guess, kind of average, although it is above average for the war as a whole. 4 tanks, 4 armored personnel vehicles, so that's a little bit lower than it has been. 13 artillery systems. There's been this high level of artillery piece attrition that we've seen from the Ukrainians as they have exacted that on the Russians. This has been an explicit targeting of artillery systems because A, they cause most deaths and they're the kind of weapon you want to get rid of the most, given that, and B, ahead of the counteroffensive, artillery systems are going to be, along with anti-aircraft warfare systems, objective number one for taking out. Speaking of which, one anti-aircraft warfare system has been taken out. Don't know what type that is. These, if they are high-value systems like S-300, are going to be incredibly useful to take out. If it's just an autocannon, it could be a different kettle of fish. 4 drones, 8 cruise missiles. Actually, far more cruise missiles than that. The cruise missile tally, I guess, is a lot higher, but it often gets compiled, or this list often gets compiled before missiles are counted in the evening, overnight. 11 vehicles and fuel tanks and 4 pieces of special equipment, as I keep saying every day at the moment. Average of less than 1 a day on special equipment, and the last few days we've had 4, 5, 4, 5, that kind of number consistently, which shows that they are really, I think, aiming for those bits of kit as well as the artillery systems. Now, these could be electronic warfare systems, but they could also be things like deminers and diggers for trenches. So there's always kind of wide remit for that category. Anyway, I guess that's fairly average for what we've been seeing, but again, those particular categories require, a little bit of special attention there to understand what the Ukrainians are doing ahead of their counteroffensive. Right. Again, how do we go about trying to see whether those figures are accurate, trying to understand those figures? Well, here is a bit of data that I think is quite useful for understanding troop losses. This is coming from Tim White. Yes, everything according to plan. In Russia, he says, it's always the intention to reduce unemployment in the motherland with Putin's ingenious plan to get thousands killed and then hire loads of drivers of refrigerated lorries to collect the bodies from Ukraine. So much winning. So this is an advert put out, and it says, urgent recruitment of refrigerator drivers is announced. This is on May the 8th, so yesterday. The Rostov Enterprise Transport Technologies LLC is urgently increasing the staff of drivers to increase the number of flights of refrigerators to the MVO zone. Required people for the position of forwarding driver with a driver's license category CE with experience in working of trucks. Responsibilities, transportation of the dead in the MVO zone to Rostov-on-Don. Bodies are loaded by employees of morgues and medical institutions. It is also the responsibility of the driver to prepare travel and accompanying documentation at the time of work. Reservations made against mobilization. Salary from 100,000 rubles without long distance flights, payments twice a month. We don't leave hours. There you go. There seems to be a high demand for drivers of refrigerated trucks of dead people in Russia. Talking about, this is concerning loss of tanks and APCs, but I have seen just this continued output of FPV drones, but not just from right across the front line, particularly in Mariinka. So here is a bit of footage that is typical of the daily footage that is being released from Mariinka here, and it's quite often. Someone's pointed out there's one particular road where this happens more often than other places. So there's like a road of death for Russian equipment. Here's a tank being taken out by an FPV first-person view drone, so you can see the direction it's flying in. They are often loaded with RPG-7 warheads, and again, here we go. Mariinka, Donetsk Oblast, a PG-7 armed Ukrainian FPV loitering munition hits a Russian BMP on the move. Nothing particularly outrageous about this footage, other than it's so common. So here we have that BMP being taken out. And then a geolocation of that road. And I know St. Tentacle saying the release of footage showing Ukrainian loitering munition strikes on Russian vehicles in the Mariinka area is becoming a near daily occurrence at this point. Absolutely. There's so much footage coming out of just Mariinka that looks just like that. So much so that I'm sure I've seen that footage before. And I go and check and no, it's a different piece of footage, just the same area, exactly the same kind of thing happening, but happening again. Anyway, last night there was a big old cruise missile launch. The Russians. This was, I think, long anticipated. I was awake quite late last night writing an article, and in fact, I might as well link that to you as well. But I was waiting for whether this attack was going to happen. There were a lot of people in the OSINT community saying, right, they've launched their plane. The planes have taken off that are going to launch these missiles. So it's going to happen now. It's going to, oh no, they passed. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. And by 1 o'clock last night, I was like, okay, it hasn't happened. Went to sleep. And then this morning, it's like, yeah, it did happen. So I don't know exactly how that came about, but it happened last night. So during the night, Russia launched no fewer than 25 cruise missiles, but Ukraine's air defenses managed to shoot down 23 of them. That is a really good interception rate. Fantastic interception rate, one of the best I've seen. In the first wave, 8 calibers were fired from the Black Sea ships. Then at 4 a.m., 17 KH-101 and KH-555s were fired by ships over the Caspian Sea. So it seems that they weren't the planes that launched them. Maybe that was a decoy. So they're trying to mess around with the Ukrainian air defenses, send up all the bombers that are going to release these, but actually fire them from other places. That seems to be what happened. Does Tim say anything else, Tim White? Kyiv survived with very little damage. The remains of rockets were found in Holosiv district of the capital, where a small fire was quickly extinguished and in the wider region. A big crater can be seen where something hit, but no injuries reported. Cherkasy in central Ukraine was also targeted. Here to a big crater, but authorities say no damage. This is a good night for the air defenses, I think, of Ukraine, and they are getting better and better air defenses as the weeks and months go on. Second attack in Kyiv in 2 days, 15 cruise missiles shot down. That's over Kyiv in particular, 23 out of 25 over Ukraine. 6 S-300 launched on Kharkiv. The harder Russian tries, the stronger is Ukrainian response. Now, I don't know any details about those S-300s because Ukraine doesn't really have the capability of shooting them down, other than the Patriots that have just come online or are coming online. Don't know exactly how many Patriots they've got, and they're probably at the moment around Kyiv rather than Kharkiv. But I do wonder whether they would put one around Kharkiv because that gets hit consistently with ballistic missiles that other air defense systems cannot shoot down. Okay, on the morning of May the 8th, so that's yesterday, in Novosibirsk, on the territory of the aircraft factory of the Sukhoi company, unknown partisans destroyed a Su-24 combat aircraft. The aircraft was on the site of aviation equipment intended for repair and modernization. So this is some part. I literally paused that and I had it on mute. Twitter hates me. I hate Twitter. It's a love-hate relationship. So anyway, that is that plane on fire, and yeah, this is the kind of activity that Ukraine will absolutely love, which is, yeah, we're not endangering our own personnel. These are partisans within Russia, causing Russia some problems. Okay, now to odds and sods. Here in Russia, there is a Victory Day parade today. and around different places. I don't know how many have been cancelled. There's been a lot of talk about cancelling them for a variety of reasons. One big reason is that they probably sent most of their equipment to the front line, so they can't have these big parades. Another reason is that the is it the Immortal Regiment, where they basically hold up placards of people who have died in previous conflicts. There'll be so many pictures of dead Russians from this conflict that they don't want that to be to be seen, basically. So that's another reason. But anyway, here's a poster celebrating May the 9th Victory Day. It says, thanks. Who designed this? Was it someone that was just trolling Russia? It says, thanks for life without war. You know, thanking these Second World War pilots for doing their job here. Thank you. We now don't have a life without war. We now longer have a life without war, and yet they don't, because of a big war in Ukraine. So yeah, interesting. General Staff: Russian occupation forces in Zaporizhia Oblast move looted property to Crimea. The forces are moving looted property from Zaporizhia Oblast frontline settlements to Crimea, the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces have reported today. On the same day, Ivan Fedorov, exiled mayor of Zaporizhia Oblast city of Melitopol, has said that Russian proxies were seizing the homes of residents who had fled the occupation. He added that 674 houses in the villages near Melitopol have been recently seized. Liberation. Or something. A little bit of analysis here on Wagner. Here, some things to understand about Prigozhin, the Prigozhin situation. So, given the posturing of Prigozhin and then Ramzan Kadyrov in charge of the Chechens, and then the Russian MOD, and all this kind of these power plays and internal machinations of the Russian war machine, there's a lot to be said about what's going on. And this chap says some things to understand about the situation. One, Prigozhin does not own Wagner. It's Putin's state corporation. There are no major private enterprises in Russia of any kind. They all form a state cartel with Putin as the arbiter. Prigozhin can't move Wagner anywhere. This is the idea that, well, actually, Wagner, whenever you see Prigozhin mentioned, he's always called the Wagner PMC financier. So he finances it, he funds it. Does he own it? How's it kind of set up? Who's it answerable to? 2. The events we are witnessing are about passing the blame for the failed spring-winter offensive, which both the army and Wagner take the blame for. Both failed, but Prigozhin's position is more precarious. This map from Deep State shows the unfulfilled aims of the offensive, something I talk about all the time, which is they've not quite taken Bakhmut after 11 months, and that's it. That's all they've achieved, which is they haven't really achieved very much. It has been a failed offensive. Who is to blame? Number 3, Prigozhin is trying to save himself because the Ukrainian offensive is about to begin, and then the possibility of heads beginning to roll among Russian officials rises significantly. Remember, it's easier to eliminate Prigozhin than Shoigu or Gerasimov. 4, finally, Kadyrov. He does actually have a personal army loyal only to him for the moment. He will never ever put his army in the meat grinder, and no one can force him to. When the central authority in Russia weakens, he will fight a civil war in Chechnya to keep power. Russia can't really force him to do anything. He's doing stuff if it's politically expedient for him and useful for him to do so, and which he sees that as a case at the moment. But he could be kind of a weak ally. I can imagine that as soon as it starts going south for Russia, and Putin in a really big political way, Kadyrov might just retreat his guys to Chechnya and sort of adapt his posture. He can't be assassinated, since that would throw Chechnya into chaos while the invasion of Ukraine is ongoing, and he can't be replaced. That's why he can freely slap around the army and Prigozhin, claiming that he's loyal only to Putin without really contributing anything. He's in quite an interesting position. Is old Kadyrov. Just having a look at Wagner and what it is, and how, here in the Wikipedia page, it says some Russian and Western observers believe that the organization does not actually exist as a private military company, but is in reality a disguised branch of the Russian MOD that ultimately reports to the Russian government. The company shares bases with the Russian military, is transported by Russian military aircraft, and uses Russian military healthcare services. The Russian state is also documented supporting the Wagner Group with passports. Private military companies are not legally allowed in Russia. Nevertheless, a number of them appear to have been operating in Russia, so on and so forth. And then down here, according to Russia investigative media Ruski Kriminal, the military command of Wagner is held directly by GRU, including its current head Igor Kostyukov and former head of Russian SSO Alexei Dyumin, with Prigozhin being responsible for its business administration. Wagner is mostly populated by current and former GRU operatives, this is convicts aside, and used for operations where direct participation is undesirable. So there you go. GRU is the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, formerly the main intelligence directorate, foreign military intelligence agency, basically. So, yeah, the argument could be that really Wagner is just another branch of the Russian MOD, uh, and seeing it in that way is important to understanding what's going on, perhaps between these different players, and whether, I don't know, there's just it could be a convenient element of the Russian MOD that they can distance themselves from it when it's useful for them to do so, but see it as part of them when that is useful. So if Wagner were to take Bakhmut, hey, it's still the Russian MOD, it's still us, and etc., etc. But if they completely fail, it's like, yeah, look what happens when we rely on those losers and all that kind of carry on. Okay, going on to military aid. No reports here says it's expected that tomorrow the US will announce, that's today, a $1.2 billion aid package under the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative to further strengthen Ukrainian air defense in the long term, US officials said today. Reports Associated Press, that's yesterday. The assistance initiative will fund Hawk air defense systems, air defense ammo, and drones for air defense. It will also buy artillery, rockets, satellite imagery assistance, and funding for ongoing maintenance and spare parts for a variety of systems, according to the officials. Now, there are some Hawk systems, though these are much older air defense systems, but still going to be useful for providing that blanket of coverage across as much of Ukraine as can be possible. And they have been provided. I think Spain has provided some Hawk systems. Other countries, they would be a really. Trent Telenko talked a lot about this some time ago, saying that really you could throw a whole bunch of Hawk systems from different countries around the world, which are effectively, they're obsolete to some degree. They've been replaced by more modern systems, but it would be really useful for Ukraine to have those. And you could provide Ukraine with a whole heap of those. And some have been provided. Abrams tanks, this is a USA Today article. Abrams tanks that the United States will supply to Ukraine are being modified to remove sensitive technology, and this is why they won't be on the front line for the offensive, the counteroffensive. The publication notes that because of this, American tanks will not participate in the spring offensive. According to US officials and military experts, this is necessary for preventative measure in case a Russian sees one of the tanks and use it for reconnaissance. What they mean by that translation is that use it to check it out, take it back and look at the tech. So it is being stripped of some of that very sensitive technology, as it has been with depleted uranium armor. So I understand. Britain has, which has prided itself on being ahead of its Western allies in introducing new weapon systems to Ukraine, now appears poised to send Kyiv the long-range missiles. The Biden administration has long denied it. So this is a Washington Post article. Now, in this Post article, some interesting little points, little nuggets here. It's well, let's go into it. This is really about storm shadows, or it seems to be about storm shadows. However, recently the UK did put out like a tender to any entity out there in the world to provide with a conglomeration of EU parties as well, to provide long-range air defense, long-range missiles and they gave a desired characteristics, set of desired characteristics, set of essential characteristics. So that's almost as if they haven't decided what missiles they're going to send to Ukraine. And can you guys out there help us? We'll buy them off you. You can make us some missiles. Here's a kind of tender situation. But having said that, there is this understanding also that they're going to send Storm Shadows, which they already have. This is an agreement or a cooperation, the Storm Shadow missile between France and the UK. So Storm Shadows, says Washington Post, can be mounted on Ukraine's Soviet-made jets and reach into Russian territory. It says British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has dismissed talk among Ukraine's benefactors of their depleted stockpiles. And this is worth mentioning again. He said this back in February. If there is a moment in this conflict we can make a difference, why not seize it? What are we waiting for? He asked of the European allies in a Munich security conference in February. What is the purpose of these stockpiles? If the weapons are degrading Russian armed forces, that is increasing our security. This is something I've been saying for ages, and he said this, and I shouted its praises at the time. This is exactly right. What these tanks and these missiles have been made to fight Soviet armor, right? This is the fight is going on now. What are we doing? Just having them sitting around in our stockpiles back in the UK. If the UK gets invaded, by any entity, then we can draw on the Article 5 of the NATO to counteract that. We don't necessarily need our own stockpiles full, because this is the war now. It's happening now. And our troops aren't fighting. The Ukrainian troops are fighting, but we can provide them with all of this stuff. Okay, the UK doesn't have huge stockpiles of tanks, but give them as many as we physically can. And, with tanks, we have given them more than we said we'd given them. But yeah, Storm Shadows, yeah, shut them over. Weeks before those remarks, according to a previously unreported file included among the classified US documents leaked online through the Discord messaging platform, US intelligence confirmed Britain intended to send Ukraine an unspecified number of Storm Shadow missiles, along with British personnel to aid in targeting. Quote, the United Kingdom will be the first country to provide Ukraine with longer-range weapons, Sunak said in his Munich speech. It's a position, there's a later quote, it's a position the UK can uniquely do, since Russia doesn't like us very much anyway. I love this, and it's absolutely true. Russia keeps coming out every so often with UK are enemy number one. And it goes, sometimes it's like another country, sometimes the US, but quite often the UK are the ones that are like, yeah, we hate the UK. And there have been some analysts saying this is quite good for UK positioning, because we're actually not as big and strong as we like to think we are. And actually, we're not as big and strong in reality as many others think we are. The UK's glory days have long gone. But if Russia keeps us up there, then actually there is this element that perception is reality, right? Perception is more important than reality. So if Russia are putting us up there as enemy number one, fair enough, you go for it. But since we're already there, there's no kind of escalation here. You already hate us, so we might as well give Storm Shadows. And this is the idea here. So it's a position UK can uniquely do more than other countries. Russia doesn't like us very much anyway, said the same British official, speaking on a condition of anonymity. We know that if we give something, it makes it slightly easier for others. So if we break that sort of, or go over that red line, as we did with the Challenger 2 tanks, then other people go, right, okay, UK have done that, fine, we can do that now. And we're like the fall guys, like, yeah, fair enough, like, they hate us anyway, so we'll break that red line. Yeah, do you want some jets? I mean, that would be nice. The thing is, the UK jets, Eurofighters, there's an overstretch in the RAF, and there are one area that gets used more than anywhere. We send our RAF jets all over the world, and we don't have a lot of capacity there. Otherwise, we probably would give jets, I'd imagine. If we had like twice the number of jets we have now, then we probably would. But we're just not in a position to do that. It would degrade the work we're doing elsewhere. Anyway, so it continues. There's definitely a different risk tolerance among different countries. We're often in an earlier place, the official said, citing the pilot training, even though no country has yet agreed to provide NATO standard aircraft, particularly F-16s, that Ukraine has asked for. While US policy remains unchanged, Pentagon officials expressed no concern when asked about the prospect of Britain sending long-range missiles to Ukraine. Quote, each country makes our own sovereign decisions on what types of security assistance and what types of equipment they provide, said Pentagon press Secretary Patrick Ryder. We commend the significant support the allies and partners are from around the world, including the UK, are providing to Ukraine. So interesting there. I'd expect there to be storm shadows. Let's have a quick look at the storm shadow. I have highlighted some areas. So the Broach warhead features an initial penetrating charge to clear soil or enter a bunker, then a variable delay fuse to control detonation of the main warhead. It's a fire and forget missile program before launch. Once launched, the missile cannot be controlled or commanded to self-destroy, and its target information cannot be changed. Mission planners program the missile with the target, air defenses, and target. The missile follows a path semi-autonomously on a low flight path guided by GPS and terrain mapping to the target area. Close to the target, the missile climbs and then bunts into a dive. Climbing to altitude is intended to achieve the best probability of target identification and penetration. During the bunt, the nose cone is jettisoned to allow high-resolution thermographic camera infrared homing to observe the target area. The missile then tries to locate the target based upon its targeting information. If it cannot, and there is a high risk of collateral damage, it is capable of flying to a crash point instead of risking inaccuracy. Wow, you can do that with the missiles. Take note, S-300s. Right, and just another paragraph here from Air Force Technology. The missile is intended to strike high-valued stationary assets such as air bases, radar installations, communications hubs, and port facilities. Some people say runways as well is sort of major target for these. Storm Shadow can engage the targets precisely in any weather conditions during day and night. The long range and low altitude combined with subsonic speed, so it only goes 0.8 Mach 0.8, make the Storm Shadow a stealthy missile, but that allows it to apparently be more stealthy. So anyway, there you go. That's the Storm Shadow. Let's get it over there ASAP. Okay, going on to a few other bits and pieces. In military aid, the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance received 189 million euros from the World Bank, and that is to be added to the state budget. It was originally received on preferential terms to cover social expenses. Croatian pledged Mi-8 helicopters are on the way. 14 Croatian helicopters could well be in service already. In fact, I've seen footage of some of these Croatian helicopters already, so at least some of them are there, possibly all of them. 9 helicopters flew to Ukraine last Thursday. Actually, were 5 remaining to be transported by land. So that's really good news. And then Poland has already transferred 10 of its MiG-29 aircraft to Ukraine as well. I've been reporting on that. That's fantastic news. Of course, that replaces lost MiG-29s. It doesn't increase the capability of the Ukrainian Air Force. Unfortunately, for that, they'll need more modern NATO jets. Ukraine has received a Romanian-made 122mm APR-40 MLRS multiple launch rocket system, which is very similar, I think, to the Grad, isn't it? At least 4 APR-40s can be seen in this photo. They were probably delivered by Croatia, which has also recently delivered 128mm RAK SA-12 MRLS. The APR-40 is based on the Soviet BM-21 Grad and uses a DAC-15-215D FAEG 5-ton 6x6 chassis. In addition to Croatia, it's also in the arsenals of Romania, Moldova, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and others. So that good, useful. Thank you very much, Romania, and possibly Croatia. Right, moving on to the parade, victory parade in Moscow, that is pretty much happening right now as I record. The armored Kamaz vehicles are reserved for parades. At the front lines, the troops use vehicles with state-of-the-art urban camouflage. This is a point I've been making for some days, that why you might not see the parades happening is because these vehicles that they show on the parades really need to be on the front line, because otherwise they're using crap like that type thing. You get the point. Well, actually, this appears to have definitely be the case. So the only tank on parade in Moscow's Victory Day parade is this single T-34 tank from the Second World War. So in fact, OSINT Technical has done a total vehicle count. Fair warning, the camera shots were almost certainly deliberately poorly framed to hide the lack of vehicles. So that's fascinating. 1 T-34, 10 Tiger IMVs, so those are like kind of MRAPs, mine-resistant armored protection vehicles, I think. 6 Ural trucks, 10 IMVs, 2 possibly BTRs, so APCs, armored personnel carriers, 6 Iskander launchers, 6 S-400 SAM surface-to-air missile launchers, 3 Topol M's, and 3 boomerangs. Not 100% sure what they are. So, also, the aerial portion of the parade was cancelled, so no flyovers. Normally, you'd expect to see somewhere over 200 vehicles in the parade, and this one was completely missing tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and of course the entire VDV. So the paratroopers just weren't there. You've got what? So according to this, 6, 18, 20, 30, 40, 47 vehicles. So that is a quarter at the most, a quarter of what would usually be there. And that shows that they are on the front line. They need to use them. And here's a bit of marching. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can turn it off the sound again. Now, my point of showing you this is you got to be thanking your lucky stars if you are a Russian serviceman and you can play drums. You're like, right, we're going to send you, and you to the front line. Hang on, I can play drums. You can play drums? Right, you're in the parade. But you're going to the front line. You're like, oh man, why didn't I choose to play the drums? It's like, hey, I'm really good at carrying flags. I can carry flags. So, parade? Front line? Okay. There's some comments that a lot of the people on parade are lots of young faces. No reports observing. Yeah, interesting. I guess you're lucky if you're there, aren't you? Rather than having a much higher percentage chance of dying on the front line. Right, the EU is introducing sanctions to Chinese companies providing help to the Russian defense industry. So the EU is going to introduce sanctions against Chinese companies that sell Russia equipment that can be used in weapons, in particular microelectronics. It concerns 2 companies from the mainland of China and others from Hong Kong. I used to live in Hong Kong. Fun fact. So the FT says Brussels plans sanctions on Chinese companies aiding Russia's war machine. 7 Chinese businesses accused of selling equipment that could be used in weapons have been listed in the new package of sanctions to be discussed by EU member states this week, which has been seen by the FT. This is pretty important, but it could be a shot across the bow of the Chinese well, one risk is it could escalate and Chinese might entrench and then start doing that and siding even more with Russia, or they really understand the importance of international trade and want to stay on side. They know which side the bread is buttered. They get far more trade from the rest of the world than they do from Russia. So they could still keep buying the hydrocarbons at low rates, but saying, yeah, sorry, we can't sell you these microelectronics because actually we'd be screwed over in these other ways by the West, and actually they're much more important than you, Russia, realistically. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, Victory Day today, May the 9th in Russia. It is a good day for the EU head to hit Kyiv. So Ursula von der Leyen is visiting Kyiv to meet with Zelensky. Excellent. I think that sends quite a nice little message to Moscow. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of that. And then we have Putin. He's made his speech already. This happened just now. Putin has begun his speech in the Red Square. He starts by saying, or at least he would do if I didn't press the wrong button there. He starts by saying, a war has been unleashed against the Russian people. The goal of the enemy is the destruction of our country. Now, I want to see if there's any sort of commentary on the fact that he's using the word war, but of course he's saying a war has been unleashed on us rather than we went to war. We went for a special military operation, and they brought the war onto us, even though we invaded. They brought the war to us. Yeah. The West provokes conflicts and coups, destroys traditional values in order to continue to dictate its own rules. Again, can't get away from the culture war stuff. And in fact, a system of robbery and violence. Oh my goodness, projection much, Putin. Kiev has become a hostage of a coup d'etat and a bargaining chip in the hands of the West, he adds. Do you know what? Jog on, Putin. Stop. It's the world's biggest hypocrite. You're just a massive bully, and you're accusing other people of bullying. So you can do one. Anyway, that's my end of news article mini rants. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the support you give. You guys are superb. Sorry this has been a bit of a long one. It's the news, and it is what it is. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.